Hey fellas, real quick before the podcast starts, I just want to let you guys know that the Cakecore Marathon 2020 is beginning on February 22nd at 9 a.m. Pacific, and it will continue to go on for a whole 24 hours. That was kind of a big announcement that we did as part of our weekly announcements leading up to the marathon, which has already started. And if you'd like to check out all the future announcements, make sure you follow us on Twitter or join our Cakecore Discord or both. The information will be shared there every Saturday until the marathon. While you're listening, we're just going to show what we have announced so far on the screen. So if you would like to get yourself up to date with why this marathon's going to be so good, you can do that by just watching while you listen, basically. And with that, I hope you guys enjoy this podcast. Welcome, fellas, to the Cakecore Podcast number 3. Today, it's a special episode because we are talking about the latest Star Wars movie in the Star Wars series of movies called Rise of Skywalker. Rise of the Skywalker, and it's number 9.
It's called The Rise of Skywalker.
It's called The Rise of the Skywalker.
The Return of the Empire.
The Return of the Skywalker Rise. And the Skywalker has risen is also another name for it. We're going to be talking about it today.
The Jedi remake.
It's
sorry,
we have
is that too controversial?
we have
Now with 6% less Ewoks.
we have Talon Stradley joining us today from Newton's Dark
what's
Room.
Slapping?
We also have Danny joining us from Danny. And then we got the 3K core people. We got James, Spods, and myself.
I'm here for 4 minutes, 40 seconds.
Is on his break at work. So if you have anything you want to say now, Spotters, it'd be a great time to say it.
Yeah, I think Jaws is a really good movie series, especially the third movie. It really made.
One. Especially Rise of the Skywalker.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
Yes, so brave. Is that all you got?
Oh, I like that one.
I didn't see the movie. No, I'm just kidding. I saw it. I don't know. Let's just jump right into it.
I mean, if we're just talking about it, you're not going to get your input in before your 3 minutes are up.
Well, that would be funnier that way.
I know. Spots. How about was it Return of the Jedi remake? True or false?
No, I don't think it was a Return of the Jedi remake. I mean, the only thing similar about it is that Palpatine dies.
Oh, okay.
Spoiler alert! Oh my god.
Yeah. So we are.
Hey guys, today we're going to be podcasting about the newest Star Wars episode. What are they going to talk about?
It's not really a spoiler though, because no one's ever really gone. You know, I mean, like Palpatine is going to come back for 11 and 12.
It's all about family.
Episode 12, you'll be back.
It's about family. That's what it comes down to.
It's about you.
You know,
Yeah,
it's about the
I don't-
friends that we made along the way. I mean, if we want to be honest here, that's what it's always been about, you know?
Yeah, isn't the
Family,
real
yeah.
Star Wars
Family you make
friends
along
you
the
make
way.
Yeah.
Okay, so force healing, stupid, right? Or just
No,
jumping.
I like that.
just
That was my
jumping into
favorite
that?
part. I like it when people die and they get brought back to life because that just adds to the story.
Yeah.
It means you don't have to get a new actor in for a new character.
And
Change
because
my mind.
I'm speed running through this podcast, so
You're hitting all the controversial
so then the
points
next,
and
the next
bounds.
thing though is that there's another unused Force thing. Well, it kind of built up in the first 2 movies, which is why I enjoyed it a lot. But the Force visions and where they were interacting with each other's settings, like
That only
or
built
not
up in the
settings, but like
second movie, not so much
interacting
in
with
the
each
first
other's
one.
sceneries. And yeah, it's like where
Well, you could
Rey
argue
hit the helmet.
You
And
could argue that's
I
actually
thought that
been
was
building
really
up
cool.
since the original trilogy with like random like talking to each other moments, like when in Empire when Luke was calling for Leia. Like you could say that was the build up of the like meeting face to face, and I think that was actually some of my favorite sequences in both 8 and 9 was like the interactions between Kylo and Rey in separate worlds or whatnot.
Okay, next
Honestly,
topic. No,
every
it's-
single
There
time that
actually-
came up, I
there-
lost my mind.
There
Lost your
was,
mind happy or lost your mind sad?
Oh no, I loved it. Like
Oh, okay, yeah.
that was one of my favorite
The
parts of The Last
cinematography,
Jedi.
like when it would switch back and forth, it
Yeah,
was so
like
cool.
they do such a good job of like making you feel like, oh yeah, they're right
Batman.
there, but then
Yeah.
not. Like it's like that's such a hard concept to convey,
Yeah.
and they just do it so well.
They
and
do it so well. Well, and the
Yeah.
idea that they had a fight with it too was so cool.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say,
like-
you had to fight this time.
Yeah.
The climax of that was insane. Like and
Yeah.
even how whenever the you know, like whenever at the very end of the movie, whenever they use the whole thing to like pass the lightsaber, like it's like every single time that like element developed, I was all for it. That was one of my favorite parts.
That
of
was the
sequel.
strongest
And they even-
Force element in the movie.
And they even brought Porgs back.
Yeah. I would say
they
maybe
gotta-
one of the less
they
stronger
gotta,
ones
you
was
know?
Force Awakens, but you know.
6%.
Wait, they brought porgs
maximum.
back? I don't even remember those.
Dude, they were there for like a half a second because like
Yeah,
they were
they
adorable.
came on. Yeah.
They were like,
Everyone-
"Rah!" And then it
Everyone's like, "Yay!" No, I'm kidding.
"Die."
Guys, it's cold and windy. Just like the planet with porgs on it.
Oh my god, just like Ock 2, the planet with korgs on it.
Porgs? Oh, I thought they were porgs. Are they
Korgs.
corgs?
Porgs
No,
work
no,
too.
they're not
Porgs,
people with teeth
porgs,
characters.
same thing.
Oh jeez.
Quark's
God.
that's a synthesizer company.
Yeah, they have to get those sponsorships, you know.
Man, I really enjoyed the Nvidias going around in this episode. Just
Oh,
like
yes, yeah.
just like naming animals.
By the
after
way, we
companies.
should probably talk
Man,
about
those-
our sponsors.
Those Kmarts.
Nvidia
in the,
Raid Shadow Legends is paying us this time for this episode, so make sure you guys.
Wait,
click the
where's
link in
my
the
cut? Where was my
description.
cut?
Sorry, it's paying
You guys are
me
getting
this
paid?
time. I probably
It's
should
paying,
mention that.
Pat, along with me and Talon.
Pat, I should let it be known that 100% of the royalties from the Cakecore business goes directly to me. So all 0 of it goes straight to me, and you all can just suck it. So because I'm not giving any
I'm
of you a
not
penny.
sure about this.
Yeah, get Skype, y'all.
No. We're not talking about Skype here. We're not talking about Rise of the Skype. We're talking about Rise of the
Rise
Skywalker.
of the
I'd rather watch
Skywalker.
Red.
Were there any like dying words you had to get out, Spods, before you're inevitably called back to work?
No, I mean my alarm just went off, so
You gotta go.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you for visiting us.
No, no. Thank you for visiting me.
Oh yes, yeah. We'll all come to your store again sometime.
All right,
Holy
goodbye.
crap.
Oh, ciao.
Yikes.
So-
Spots got less screen time than Princess Leia. Oof.
Now's where we talk crap, right?
Yeah, about Spods
Yeah,
specifically.
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy's a
Um,
job. What a loser.
Yeah.
Now,
I'm so
imagine
glad
having
I don't have a
life.
job.
Imagine making money. It couldn't be
Oh
me.
my gosh, that'd be
Wait,
beautiful.
wait,
Except
you
I
can
do it with
actually make
Cakecore all the
money?
time.
That's amazing.
No.
That's something you make? Is that how you get it?
Oh,
Oh my gosh, it makes so much more
just make
sense
it
now.
ignore
Guys,
inflation.
My
That's
life
why
is
I'm
coming like
homeless.
full circle. Do you guys know that meme? I think it's from I forget what movie, but it's the one where they're like doing drugs or whatever. Where the guy's like,
Oh, Avengers
What?
Endgame?
no, no, it's the one where they're like,
No, the writers are
like
doing drugs.
$2,000.
Yeah.
I was getting paid $1,000. I was getting paid $500. You guys were getting
Yeah,
paid.
you guys are getting paid.
And then like that meme has been like you know like entered the mainstream. We used it for other things. And then right now, whenever we started talking about pay, like I almost said that, but I was like, wait, that's
Spots
just how it
already said it.
originally started. Like that was just
Yeah.
the first meme. Like that's not being created. That's nothing new. Like that's just going all the way back.
We're just
to the beginning.
we're reading the script of a random 2011 movie that came out that didn't even have a huge splash.
For the
but-
record, though, I remember really enjoying that movie.
I actually didn't see it, so I you know I can't call it bad. I
I
like that
enjoyed
movie.
not seeing it.
That's true.
You
I
know
can
that?
say that even though I didn't see it, my life has been all right. You know what I mean? I don't know if we're just circling the topic at this point because we don't want to start it off. But I would love to hear someone's just kind of like general take on it, just to kind of get us going. That we can all kind of give our takes as well. How did you guys overall feel about Star Wars, the Rise of the Skywalker?
All right, here's my thoughts.
Okay.
I thought it was a fine and enjoyable movie, and it
Right.
was, I about enjoyed it the same as like The Force Awakens,
Okay.
but it doesn't do anything for the trilogy, which is a stance I've seen online a lot, and that's basically my thing. Is that I think that each of
Yeah.
the new Star Wars movies are solid on their own. I don't think any one of them is super bad, but obviously, like as a whole, they are not very cohesive either thematically
Yeah.
or plot wise. And I do have some issues with the Rise of Skywalker, but I'm sure we'll get into that stuff.
Yeah, I think I pretty much echo most of what you said there. I think you're right. I think they are just fun, enjoyable movies. Every time I see it, it's always fun to see the explosions and stuff like that, and it's fun to see characters we've seen before and what they're doing now. You know, but yeah, as a trilogy, this one in particular didn't contribute much, and I don't feel like any of the others really contributed much as a trilogy either. And I think I would agree on the level that I enjoyed it as much as like Force Awakens, I would say, because it's kind of similar structurally to Force Awakens, and
I don't know about that one because that's one of the things I actually really liked about the Rise of Skywalker was how unique it felt compared to some of the other movies. I know that we've talked about like, oh, it's a remake of the Return of the Jedi, and while the ending like kind of feels like that with like, you know, Ben's redemption arc and shocking the dude, there's so much more to that. Like for me, Rey is so incredibly compelling during that because she's just dealing with so much and it's so nuanced. Like I really enjoyed seeing Kylo Ren's story arc through that. So there's a lot of really strong parts and there's also a lot of weak parts.
I think like Rey and Kylo are definitely the strong part. They're the highlights of the whole series.
Oh,
because in to show differences between Force Awakens and this one, like Force Awakens didn't give them too much to build up. Like they wasn't so much building with those characters in that one. Because granted, they had to introduce so many things. But the thing is even I think the reason I think they kind of have similar structures is because number 9 also is in that strange position where they have to, instead of introducing a bunch of things, they have to show a bunch of things, like finish things almost. So, and I think that's why I see like the similar structure of like, we got to go. You know, we got a lot that we have to get out here, and we still got to keep people interested with action sequences and whatnot. Like it seemed like both of them had a quota, a checklist that they have to hit, and because of that, they were kind of rushing through a lot of the stuff. While I feel like number 8's was less like that. It was less like we have to do this. It was more like, let's do this. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's why I see the similarities between 7 and 9. But
this movie starts at a breakneck pace. The first 35 minutes of the movie take place on 4 separate planets. It's Mustafar, Exegol, Alan Cross, and Pasana. And then they can't even. 10 minutes later, they're on Kijimi? Kijimi. And where there's some interesting dialogue or interesting scenes, there is an interesting dialogue in the first 35 minutes of that movie. I like, as someone who thoroughly enjoyed that movie, the first 30 minutes are painful.
Well, and
they fly now? Wow.
They already cut out stuff from it too. Like they literally just say, by the way, Palpatine's alive in the yellow text because they're like, we don't even have room for this.
We don't know
like,
what.
I heard, someone said they wanted to do, or they could have done like 2 movies or something, but they couldn't.
Well,
they could have. But
the Rise of Skywalker in itself should have been 3 movies.
Right.
That movie.
They had
honestly,
they had enough themes to fit 3 movies, but like I mean, I don't know if that necessarily means each theme would be able to stand on its own, if that makes sense. But they had like so many different objects and themes that would normally be the focus of like one movie. So the fact that they put it all chock full into one thing was probably not a great idea.
And I know J.J. Abrams did want to do 2 movies. That was actually him who suggested that to Disney because he had like a 3.5-hour cut of that film, and there's a lot that that we don't even get to see. Like, there's a lot of complaints over Rose. Like, everyone hated her in The Last Jedi, and then all of a sudden they're like, but where is she in like this? But like, she's an important character, and we don't see her at all. But there's a lot of scenes that they shot with her that didn't get put into the film just because they cut it. And on top of that, you have things like my biggest problem with the film, I know there's a lot, but this is the biggest thing that irked me, is how they played up the Finn thing so much, like I have something to tell you, and then they literally never
they literally just don't show it in the final cut.
They sort of, but you can very easily infer from that movie that what he's trying to tell her is that he's Force sensitive.
But I don't even know that, because here's the thing.
I don't even know that either.
To me, that's so obvious. Like, to me, the whole Force sensitive thing was like, oh, I see. They're being clever with cinematography and with plot, and he's Force sensitive, and I, as an observant moviegoer, caught that. Now I wonder what he has to tell Rey. Like, in my mind, the thing that he had to tell Rey was like something he discovered.
Hey,
I sort of was just like,
no, exactly.
I kind of forgot about it, but maybe that's just me. I didn't really.
I did.
See it as a massive thing.
I forgot about it too.
I was not even interested in it, and it wasn't until I saw it a second time that I'm like, wait, what was that? And then I was watching for it the whole film, and I'm like, they literally never address it.
Why make such a point to showcase that if it's not, it doesn't have any influence whatsoever on anything.
It was so cheesy too, the way that it was literally going. I was like, wait, I have to tell you something. Like that was my least favorite part of the film, I would say. But that was a thing that was in that extended cut. So they had this long thing. They really probably should have made it 2 movies, but they didn't. And then because of that, the stuff got crushed, and the stuff that they chose to keep was still kind of incoherent. And again, I enjoyed the film. It's not a very good film.
It's just
it seems like we're talking about the things we don't like about the movie first. I'd like to point out the entire sequence on Kijimi, the planet where.
Which one's Kijimi?
It's the planet where they find out Poe's a spice runner and all that, and that is That points out my biggest problem with the whole new saga is we know nothing about these characters, and beyond that, these characters know nothing about these characters.
Right.
That's
something someone said. Someone said to me they don't care about the characters.
Yeah, and that's something that Star Wars, the original. You get scenes with Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker before he's on his adventure. You get to see him develop with his family and with Obi-Wan or Ben Kenobi, I guess. But this new saga, they just threw characters into the action. We're like, all right, here it is. Here's stuff that's happening and explosions and stuff.
And there's a pattern with each of the movies when it comes to introducing characters. What they like to do is throw in this new person awkwardly without letting them like slowly creep in as maybe they should. One of the less awkward throw-ins, I would say, okay, with initial introductions, I would say Rose's initial introduction wasn't too clumsy. It was
her character in like,
Rose has by far the best introduction of any
character. She's a really good character. Like I stand
with regards to like some of her other with her development, that's when it gets like a little bit rocky or whatnot. But what they tend to do with all three of these movies is as soon as they introduce someone, they look at what the reaction to that person is, and then when they see a negative reaction, they revert what they did. They take it back, they dial it back, and like cut it out almost. Because, like, if you even remember back in Force Awakens, they introduced the Maz, right? I think her name was Maz. Like, someone who's kind of introduced as an important character. And then immediately after that, they're like, okay, people didn't like her. Let's just kind of shelve her a bit. And then, like, let's introduce a new character called Rose. And then everyone's like, everyone was way too mean with Rose or whatnot. Yeah. So they're like, okay, 1 minute of screen time with Rose up here. And then
3 minutes flat in
they introduced that new girl who had something going on with Lando or something like that around the end. Again, that bothered me because that was like, Lady Stormtrooper. I didn't mind her so much, but it just felt like it just seems weird to keep constantly introducing these characters when we almost now expect them to like not have any significance later. Even Snoke, like when they full on introduce Snoke and they're like, all right, let's kill him off, even if. I don't know. It just seems like a lot of short-term like taping up to like these big things they start. Like, okay, let's like lightly patch that up. Or and it's not even just with characters, just with like things that happen when people get upset about them. Yeah. Even like Starkiller Base, right? Remember when that came out? People were kind of like, dude, come on, you just did another Death Star and it just exploded and it's fine. They're like, okay, let's very, very ever so slightly address that in number 9. Let's say, wow, what a failure that was.
Oh, jeez, there's an entire fleet of things that can do what Starkiller Base did. Oh, boy.
There's always this, like, we're actually talking to the audience right now. We're not, like, we're addressing you guys right now.
At its core, this trilogy is just flawed from the point of it is directed by 2 different directors.
I know.
And neither one of them gets 2 movies in a row to be able to actually try to tell their story. And,
neither of them gets problem, what they want.
I would say, besides obviously the characters being flat pieces of garbage.
That's a whole nother thing. Just the transferring between directors and them constantly looking back at what the other director did and like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't like that. Like. Directors are stubborn. That's what they do, and that's okay. But when you don't let a director carry through their vision, then of course you're going to get something like messy, And it was interesting to bring up the prequels in this because that had George Lucas as the director for all 3 of those, and he had this one vision that he kind of carried through. And the prequels weren't very cohesive either. I mean, the prequels were very messy, obviously, as a trilogy.
Like the prequels were like some of the most cohesive. Like they weren't necessarily great.
Would you say, but specifically between movies though? Because like as one movie, yes, they're each cohesive. I would say like the start of 1 and the end of 1 is a very cohesive film. Same thing with 3, the start of 3 and the end of 3. But like in between the movies, I feel like it gets a little choppy because it's like jumping through different years and then like there's some changes in organizations and
it's hard because like I obviously the prequels have a lot of issues, but my issues with them are never like the overall story. Like
me neither.
The plot points
not even with episode 2.
Oh, except episode 2.
I would even say that like episode 2, like, and again, it's been a long time since I've seen the prequels.
Careful where you step.
Well, a lot of my interaction with them has been on this micro level. But for me, like the prequels are the most like compelling, like overarching story. Like if I was to sit down,
you're allowed to be wrong. Yeah.
If I was to sit down and tell somebody a story, I think that the prequels have like the best story because if you look at the original trilogy, it is pretty boring, and maybe that's because I grew up with it, but like it's the rebels against that. We don't really know much about the Empire other than they're just a generic empire, right? So a lot of the criticisms people have about the new movies can be applied to the original trilogy.
All of them, yeah, for real.
And
I think it's important to like these were all made to be trilogies, and like other trilogies have existed before. If you look at Lord of the Rings or like Godfather or something, right? Things that were meant to be a story that's told within 3 films or whatnot. You can find examples of good film transitions where something feels cohesive all the way through, such as Lord of the Rings. I mean, that's just essentially one movie, right?
Part of the reason for that is, to be fair, it was originally meant to be one, but yeah.
Well, and it was all shot together. I mean, there's like a lot of different little reasons. But what's important?
Stars aligning.
As far as Star Wars go, it's important to acknowledge that like as trilogies, these don't translate very well between movies. Like if you watch them back to back, pretty much any of the trilogies are going to feel like a little bit strange.
Honestly, and that's one of my favorite parts about the Star Wars movies, because like so many trilogies, it's like, oh, now we're picking up right after this or right after that. Like the fact that we can have this massive jump in time and just kind of understand that there's been fighting, like the fact that the characters grow off stage, like I actually really enjoy that, because every trilogy ever is like one right after the other, right after the other. You know, like you look at John Wick, like all of those movies are great, but they're the same movie more or less, and like whatever, like it just feels like a lot. And then you look at Star Wars and the time, like, you know, you see Anakin in episode 1 and Anakin in episode 2, and you realize like, oh yeah, time has passed, this world has evolved and changed. And then the opening credits like catch you up, and the world is so like intuitive and understandable that I've never once felt confused watching Star Wars. Like I'm never who are these people? What are they? Because like they're bad, they're good. It's always been a light dark side kind of thing.
That's a fair point. What's out of interest? So there was a 10-year gap between 1 and 2. I'm interested because I'm not, quite good in the lore. What's the gap between 7 and 8 and 8 and 9?
7 and 8.
7 and 8 is right after each other. Like 8 is right after, like maybe a day after, and between 8 and 9 is maybe a year or 2.
Yeah, 8 and 9. 8 and 9 is a really large gap. I mean, like the entirety of the Resistance TV show takes place during that time. I saw a thing online recently, but yeah, like Last Jedi, bam, bam. That one is like way after the other, which kind of helps smooth over some of its issues. But then again, like you have to go looking for that information, so it doesn't really benefit the film.
Yeah, and it's like the same thing with kind of the Mandalorian. I don't know if you guys have seen the Mandalorian, but already watching that, it's kind of aiding like the gap between 6 and 7. Like it's already making that transition smoother, but it still came out, many years after number 7. Like we're already done with that. So it's like, if it felt awkward when it first came out, then it felt awkward, regardless if it gets like post fixed, but to go back to like cohesiveness through like the prequels or whatnot, ultimately George Lucas had to get to where episode 4 was, right? And because of that, there is this line of like understanding between all 3 of them. When it comes to individual plot of number 2, I think if you watched it again, you wouldn't find it as clear as you might remember, because there's a lot of the things in there that's a little bit hard to follow, such as like the bounty hunter sequences with the clone sequences, and then the droid sequences and whatnot. I think you would find that like it's a harder plot to follow than you might remember. With regards to 1 and 3, though, I think that's one of the reasons I love Empire. Oh, I just said I love a prequel, but one of the reasons I love The Empire Strikes Back. No, not Empire. Sorry,
Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith. Yeah. Okay. Because I do love Empire also, but one of the reasons I love Revenge of the Sith is because with regards to its storytelling from point A to point B, like all the way through, the pacing is great. It develops at a very nice speed. There's only like 1 or 2 times you're like, all right, let's speed it up a little bit. But the way the characters change from the beginning to the end feel very smooth, and they all make sense like to that change. There might have been like you might say Anakin from number 2 and going from number 2 to number 3 doesn't translate very well, but from the beginning of the actual film to the end of the film, they're different characters, which is good. Because you don't want the character to be the same all the way through.
That's also a product of them being separated throughout the film, and it's something they don't do in The Rise of Skywalker. Mainly because those characters have been the entirety of the other 2 movies. They're not together. And it's something that they would have benefited from if they had the characters, say, the Force Awakens. That's the first of this new trilogy. If they are together and they destroy Starkiller Base together and they're all friends and all that. That'd be cool. That then you build up that they're a team. You have them have it be a team a bit in Last Jedi. Also changed that movie completely. Though I do enjoy it, it doesn't work for the story they're trying to tell with the other two.
Well, that's to assume they're trying to tell a story. But
well, assuming they're trying to tell a story, you can't tell with what Snoke is, and the only good thing in Last Jedi is the fact that Ben Solo is an amazing character. And
I would like strongly disagree, and I defended the Last Jedi a lot, but I would be more interested in seeing Rian Johnson's Star Wars trilogy than I would. Was it Rian Johnson? I don't know.
No, Rian Johnson.
You can call Rian if you
want.
He made Star Wars episode. You can call him Rian.
I am more interested in seeing that trilogy than I am of J.J. Abrams' like more cookie cutter thing.
I honestly agree. Like
that was one of the big criticisms. Everybody was
let me ask you this: would you want to see a Rian Johnson 7, 8, and 9 with Last Jedi as it is, or would you like to see him having done 7, then do whatever his version of 8 would be off of his version of 7, and then
I would be interested in seeing both. I would love to see all the alternate universes that played out. If I had to choose, like I think that Force Awakens into The Last Jedi was fine, because after I came out of The Force Awakens, everyone was like, that was good, but it felt very same. And I'm like, but watch, they're doing it the same because they're giving you like the plot is the thing that is the same that you latch onto. The characters are all very different and dynamic, and those characters are going to flourish in The Last Jedi, which personally I feel like happened. Like The Last Jedi was kind of a slap in the face. They went different routes, but then I was like, okay, I'm really curious to see what happens next. And then the Rise of Skywalker didn't quite deliver, but I'd be really interested in seeing Johnson's like use of the trilogy through, because those developments and those changes he made, I was very fascinated with.
Yeah, and I agree with 75% of what you said there. I think like the flourishing of the characters is so well done in number 8 to the characters that did flourish. I don't think all the characters flourished. I really don't think Finn flourished. I cannot see that arc as a dynamic arc at all. And
I got about 7 minutes here. So if you don't mind, if we're talking about characters, sir, sorry, my apologies for cutting you off, Mr. Patnack. God, sir,
okay,
man,
go for it.
Don't
just
kick
say
me
it.
out of the Cakecore Extended
Just
Universe.
say what it is.
The mishandling of Finn is the biggest drop ball in this series. He is an incredibly interesting character. You're introduced to him. He is what drew a lot of people into Episode 7. I don't know if you all remember the trailers, but he is featured heavily as a defecting stormtrooper who is
they set him
marketed
up for
as he becomes a Jedi in Episode 7, or at least in the trailers. And they just don't follow through on anything. They don't give him a character. The one thing I really like they did with him, and it's why I enjoy Rise of Skywalker, is that when he meets all those stormtroopers on the planet with the Death Star, whatever it's called. Really Keef, it's like Keef Bar, Keef Beer or something.
Heath Bar, chocolate bar. This episode's sponsored by Heath.
Keef Beer. I don't know. It's someone can fact check me on that. But it's something he needed earlier in the franchise. He needed to meet those characters probably in Episode 8. That should have been him and Rose's adventure. Probably should have led to that, because that would have been enhanced the character a bit more.
I feel like ideally, because like what Talon was saying, they were so focused on the plot with number 7 and like in revisiting this old plot to set the foundation for the rest of the trilogy. I think really though they needed to take a step away from that to give these characters a chance to flourish, even in the first movie. Because in the first movie, it is the start of a trilogy, but they pretty much Rey hasn't really changed from the beginning of Force Awakens to the end of Force Awakens. It's pretty much the same foundational character. And for a film itself, like I feel like you need to have that like that movement, that kind of realization or whatnot. Same thing with Poe.
That's why with Rey's character, that's why Episode 8 takes place right after Episode 7, is that it is a continuation of her character's growth.
Yeah, and I feel like her character's growth in number 8 was done really well. It just needed a little bit more time on it. They needed to stop focusing on it.
So you understand who that character is first.
I also feel like we're looking at it like we're looking at like almost too cookie cutter, if that makes sense. Like, because she does go on a journey in that film. She just ends at the same place, which is a legitimate kind of storytelling. You know, it's like great art and novels and storytelling throughout history is filled with those kind of novels where somebody goes on this adventure and they're like, wow, I really messed up. I'm just going back to the beginning, right? Like, she goes on this thing. She kind of goes to the dark side a little bit, where she like goes down to the hole and like looks at that, and that doesn't lead anywhere. She goes to these things, like she's trying things, she's moving throughout it.
In number 8?
In number 8, the Last Jedi.
I think
but
you
then,
accidentally said number 7 at first.
Sorry, I can't
confused.
do the numbers with these. The numbers
okay.
like don't match up with my brain.
I know. Pretty soon it's gonna be 20, 21, and 22. So like we just have to deal with it. You know?
I know, but that's kind of like my like it's a journey that ends in the same place, and that's what makes some of the payoff. I mean, there wasn't really a payoff in like the Rise of Skywalker on that front. Like, I really like that she was a Palpatine, but like
I think
it didn't set transition.
Yeah.
It didn't carry that momentum. From
How do you guys feel about the scenes on Exegol?
Loved it. Sorry.
Wow. Let's get a beef in the chat.
Talon of Newton's dark
Spotters, you can take spotters out of the podcast, but you can't really take spotters out of the podcast.
Wait,
I really enjoyed this.
You
I
can
love
take
that
spotters
set.
out of the podcast, but you can't take the podcast out of the. Oh wait, never mind.
wait. What planet? What planet was that again?
That's the thing. I don't even know.
Testicle was the planet where Palpatine was. I mean, Exegol was the planet where Palpatine was on with the lightning. The Sith planet. I thought it was really cool, personally. I think I really love that line at the beginning where Palpatine reveals his lab. He's like, the path of the Sith is a path to many abilities some consider unnatural.
Freaking Palpatine, dude.
Do you think? Combining the two conversations real quick, do you think, and this is maybe is blatantly obvious, maybe it's been said somewhere, but at what point did they decide that she was going to be Palpatine's granddaughter? Is that something that's always been?
They definitely.
Or did they
I think it's
just come
always.
up with it?
No, I don't think so. That was the Rise of
It
Skywalker.
explains how powerful she is.
I think that does, but I
Perfectly.
think it was straight up Rise of Skywalker response to people complaining about how powerful she was, and to the idea that she was actually no one. Like,
I
'cause
want to.
think... Oh, go for it.
Well, I just say I want to believe that there was one thing in this entire trilogy that they knew was going to happen at the very end or whatnot. Like they had at least one idea when they made this character, and that was like, because typically when you make these kind of characters or whatnot, and with how much significance they were drawing to who her family was, I want to believe that that's one of the things they just wrote into the character, was that she's a Palpatine. We don't know how we're going to explain it yet, but it's going to get explained. But I also feel like maybe that's too much credit. Maybe they just saw how Rian Johnson was like, your family's nothing. And like, people didn't like that, so let's put it back to a Palpatine.
I never really believed that. I'm not sure why. Because who was it? It was Kylo Ren said it just after they'd fought the guards, did he not? He was like, you're nothing and all that. I don't know. I never really believed that as a casual viewer.
Well,
I didn't think that was. I thought he was just saying that just to get her to come over. That's the way I interpreted it.
Yeah, I think like I just didn't really care either way. Like I feel like if her parents ended up just being nothing, I feel like that worked for her character in that film, so I bought it, you know? Like I was like, okay, this works for her development, so I'm okay with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I agree.
Having her be a Palpatine.
I just think it might have I personally discredited Kylo Ren as a good source of info, basically.
That's a good point, James, because who tells Kylo Ren who Rey is? It's Snoke, and Snoke is just Palpatine, just a puppet of Palpatine trying to get Kylo Ren to do his bidding. He's purposely lying.
But
I don't pinpoint him as a liar, though. Is the thing. I don't.
Palpatine?
A liar.
His whole plot in Episode 9. Oh, Kylo. Well, yeah, Kylo doesn't know. Kylo thinks, or Ben Solo, whatever you want to call him, he truly believes that he knows the correct information about Rey. At least up until he keeps losing to her or something. I don't know. It's a bit complicated.
Yeah.
I think that's like. I think that we're supposed to mistrust Kylo in that instance, right? But I believed it because it was offering up something, and I expected that to be reaffirmed in the Rise of Skywalker. To me, I personally, the entire Rise of Skywalker felt like they planned it after The Last Jedi, because it seemed too much like everybody hates this. We're not gonna. Everybody hates Rose. Not gonna do Rose. Everybody thinks she's too powerful. She's a Palpatine. Everybody like it's all too convenient.
It's frustrating.
And
it's like downright frustrating.
Going back to your point, partner, is there
we'll get to that.
Is there anything in the ninth movie that you could kind of attribute to they had this plan from the beginning? Is there anything whatsoever?
I wanted to believe the Palpatine thing just because with how I know characters are written or whatnot, typically when you write a character for a trilogy and you have this big like family resemblance or family heritage or whatnot, if they're purposely building it up through the entire trilogy of like who this family is, I'd like to believe that's thought out from the beginning. Just I think what they had to make shift was like, how do we portray this? And maybe Rian Johnson, maybe it was JJ's plan all along, and then Rian Johnson threw the wrench in the machine or something.
No, they were talking, like, you have to realize that he didn't come in and just make like one of the largest films of history just for like, you know, craps and giggle. Like they was a plan. Like he was involved in that process.
Yeah.
That's why I think that the process changed since that film was released. Because here's the thing. If you have, okay, so picture this. Episode 7, Force Awakens, very much cookie cutter, as I mentioned, of plots, but with more dynamic characters, and that's kind of where we leave it. And then Episode 7 is a rejection of the old plot. We still have those same dynamic characters, but all of a sudden we're realizing that Snoke isn't important. Rey's parents aren't important. It's
number 8, dude. You said number 7 again.
Number 8.
Number 8.
It's just like Kylo said in number 8. Like you have to let go of the past to become your own person. And then in number 9, we have these self-actualized characters. We're no longer like being beholden to the past of Star Wars because we're not caring about Palpatine or Darth Vader or all these other guys. We care about these characters that have rejected their own past and come into their own as powerful, influential people. That's the arc that I would have seen, and that's the one that I think they had. But instead, everyone hated The Last Jedi, and so then they shoehorned in Palpatine, then they shoehorned in like all of these other things to try to give it some closure, and instead, The Rise of Skywalker feels all too reliant on the past. You know,
one thing I would say is this whole series, every character seems to be them rejecting who they are. Luke Skywalker rejects who he is in the original trilogy because he isn't
rejects
the hero
who he is
anymore.
In the second trilogy too.
Yeah, sure, whatever. But Han Solo rejects being a rebel general. You get Rey rejecting being a scavenger, rejecting being a Palpatine. You get Finn rejecting being a stormtrooper. You get Poe rejecting being a spice runner. I know it's only one scene, but it's something. You get Ben Solo eventually rejecting being the stooge of an emperor or a supreme leader or whatever, or being the evil guy. You also get him rejecting being a Jedi at the beginning, and also even with Hux, you get Hux rejecting being himself. These characters are just, it's them throughout these stories. We're just rejecting who they are meant to be, and that's the one thing I can really appreciate about this trilogy is it takes these characters that they probably, like Rey would be a really powerful Sith. She'd probably be the most powerful Sith in the galaxy, and Ben Solo would have probably been the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy. But they both rejected who they are, and I like the idea and the arc of we're watching these characters who awkwardly aren't what they're supposed to be, and it's kind of refreshing. I know that they're not the deepest characters, they're not the best made, they don't have great story arcs even.
I think that's a nice optimistic way to look at it. I think that's it's kind of, remember when George Lucas said it's like poetry. It rhymes. Like, you could say, there's been that one theme of, like, kind of challenging who you are, but then accepting it ultimately, as opposed to making your own destiny, in a sense. I mean, the entirety of Star Wars is about a destiny that's destined to happen no matter what. Like, the Chosen One. I mean, the whole saga of Anakin being the Chosen One to eventually kill the Sith, despite him rejecting who he is or whatnot. But does that get tiring after 9 movies?
But also, within Star Wars, there is no real Chosen One. There is no prophecy.
Oh.
The Rise of Skywalker rejects that by saying that... no, seriously. The whole point, the Emperor coming back, fulfilling that you will bring balance to the Force.
Anakin wasn't the Chosen One?
There was no Chosen One. There was no real prophet.
So do we have to? So Danny, do we have to watch the first 6 movies now in a different way?
Well, you can skip Phantom Menace and Attack the Clones because they don't matter.
Okay, can we watch the
others? And just switch in Rogue One instead of those 2 movies.
No, you don't. You really do not need to see Rogue One. It
Rogue
doesn't. It doesn't
cool
contribute.
Movie. I will defend it to.
Even if it's a cool movie, it doesn't contribute to the larger picture whatsoever. It's literally one plot point.
It is what Rogue One is. It's the opening crawl to Episode 4.
Yeah,
which granted, there's room
which
for
is
that.
interesting.
There's
it's
room
cool.
for
It's
that.
a cool story to tell.
That is interesting.
Let's double the movie count to do the movie for every intro crawl.
Yeah, no, they're gonna do a movie for every opening crawl.
It's just a shame
watch out
that
for Episode 8. It's a 2-minute movie.
It's just a shame that they didn't also have really cool characters to go with that really cool story arc. Because I didn't care about any of that team when they died. I cared because it was that they were dying. That's sad. But other than that, like it just felt like it was literally just a movie of sacrifice. Like, we sacrificed ourselves for this one to fill a plot point, basically. And I don't know. I'm more into the emotional turmoils and whatnot. Like Rey goes through when she finds out her family is no one. when Rian Johnson was like, "What if Rey's family's nobody?" And then she's like, "That destroys her," and that's a powerful moment in the trilogy or whatnot. So it feels weird to me to then go back on what you say and be like, "By the way, your bloodline actually is important. Also, I don't like to picture Palpatine actually having kids." That's it. Just I feel like I never needed to know. Like, why does everybody have to be a part of a certain bloodline?
Well, and that's
it's a story about family.
That's a defense that I've seen.
It's not a story about the Skywalker family.
A defense of number 8.
But see, that's the defense that I've seen.
Here,
guys, Talon wants to say something.
Welcome to my TED Talk, ladies and gentlemen.
No, because if you look at the original movie, right, you look at Star Wars Episode 1, Luke is nobody. Like, the fact that he was, like, Anakin's dad and all, like, that was added... What did I say?
4.
A New Hope.
Episode 1.
Oh my god.
Well,
the first one.
No,
the first Star Wars.
Cut him some slack.
The first Star Wars.
The first Star
Wars. The first Star Wars, he is nobody. Like, he is literally a farmer out in the middle of nowhere, and that's part of the reason why that film is so appealing, because anybody can go on these grand adventures, right? It's like he is literally no one. And then once they start going into it, because originally it wasn't supposed to be a trilogy. Once they made a trilogy, then they started adding those kinds of things. But that's why, like, you know. Yeah, like not everybody needs to be a part of the Skywalker line. Not everybody needs to be part of the Palpatine line. Like the charm of it is that anybody can go out there. And that's why I liked The Last Jedi ending with a little farmer kid, you know, grabbing the broom. It reminds us that like anybody has this power and can become Rey, you know, one of the most powerful Jedi, or Anakin or any of these people.
I still feel like it was bizarre to have that be the ending crawl, because I feel like it's trying to give it more importance than it actually needs. I feel like a more appropriate time would have been after they leave that planet or whatnot, just as like a small side thing.
Kids instead of those weird horse creatures, but I mean, if
they didn't care about rescuing the kids.
We're gonna
nitpick
kids episode
are okay.
Well, yeah, what happened to those kids? Anyway, no, sorry.
No, you see, the fans didn't like it, so they just pretended like it didn't happen.
Audience interact. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Do you think like the whole social media thing is in? Because obviously you've said that,
definitely.
But would that? I wonder how that would have influenced the other trilogies though, like because they were obviously before.
Return of the Jedi would not have been the same movie. I think Empire and A New Hope would have been relatively the same.
At least by the time the prequels came out, the following was big enough to where, regardless of social media, information from fans got through, right? Like they knew people didn't like Jar Binks, so they cut him out. You know what I mean? So like even Star Wars has always been so subject to what people want. The whole reason Luke doesn't turn evil at number 6 is because they wanted people to see Luke as a hero, and that wasn't going to be the original like story progression. Now, whether or not that's for better or for worse, I don't really care, but it just goes to show like Star Wars has literally always been about like what the fans think of it, and I think that's where most of the rockiness comes from. But I mean, you know, ultimately, they take their own liberties at certain points in times, and it ends up working for them sometimes. In the prequels, I think sometimes when George Lucas was like, let's take an approach at politics, making this into a more political movie about wars and giant armies and stuff. The CGI pair is an example of something that probably didn't need to have that kind of liberty taken on, or CGI in general, or recreating the original 3 just to add CGI stuff. That's probably all liberties that didn't need to be taken.
Hayden Christensen.
Yeah, but like
good guy, but God,
he's a good actor.
I think
he's a great guy. He's not.
Are you kidding?
He is a good actor.
I like the lines when he was chatting it up.
Anything else?
Sorry.
He's a good actor who had to make the line "I hate sand" word. Like,
I know. And that's why I always say, like, if anyone hasn't seen the prequels, they should try watching it sometimes just in another language with subtitles, because the actual physical acting is there. The physical acting works totally fine. It's just the lines are complete horse doo-doo.
And like sand, it's coarse and rough and gets everywhere.
Imagine it as an anime though, right? Because like that's what they say about anime. Like the actual dialogue is most of the time cheesy crap, but you don't know it because you hear Japanese speaking. So they're like or whatnot, and you're not thinking
they're not the. We'd like to just, for all the viewers out there, we're not as insinuating that all Japanese animes are just the Swedish Chef from the Muppets talking.
The Japanese Swedish Chef.
Thanks for being like us out there, Danny.
Making sure.
Also, we're sponsored by Swedish Chef now.
We were sponsored by Swedish Chef, and
but basically, like
I scoot on up on out of here. Ewoks did not need to be in that movie. Goodbye, good night, and
well, you know why they brought. Well, I should finish saying. A big
Oh,
reason people like anime or like watching anime without dubs is because a lot of times like the lines are totally cheesy. You just don't know it because you hear tone instead of words, right?
It also makes
and
you pay
if you just
attention
hear
to
the tone.
storyline. You pay attention to the physical storyline rather than like hearing it. And goodbye.
If you hear that, are you leaving?
No, see ya. Oh, it's just
okay.
us two
Yeah,
now.
he has a D&D session he has to go to. So.
What? Okay.
But
that's terrible.
It's just like if you just watch the prequels without hearing what they're saying and just listen to their tone and their emotions or whatnot, I'm sure it's going to be like a more powerful experience than if you only pay attention to the ridiculous words that are uttered. And especially like the last scene with Obi-Wan and Anakin, like that's a powerful scene if you have no words. It's like what, like the emotional climax right there is insane after like all that they've been through, you know, like that's what you call a good movie moment. And it just happens to be littered with ridiculous speechcraft or whatnot. To briefly talk about what Danny was talking about with Ewoks, the reason they showed the Ewoks around the end is because J.J. Abrams already killed off all these other planets, so they didn't have much nostalgia to bank off of when looking at different planets. Like, Endor's still alive, let's take that. Or the moon of Endor, whatever it actually is. But yeah, I know we've talked a whole bunch about stuff other than the movie itself. But the reason is because it's the finale, you know? It's supposed to kind of like... It's hard to not talk about this when this movie draws so much on old material. You kind of have to bring up old material. But anyway, yeah, what were you saying, James?
Sorry, no, I was just wondering. One of the can we change the subject? Can we get onto something new?
Yeah,
that
sure.
Spots did hint at it. To be fair, and I guess to preface this, I'm what you would call a casual viewer. I guess I don't really think about a film much until afterwards. Afterwards, when I hear all the criticism and all the stuff people have to say, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, that does make sense. But for some reason, this just really bothered me throughout. Is the whole Spot's termed as the force healing, but it's not just the force healing. It's the concept of somebody dying and then coming back, and it kind of happens several times. So there's Chewbacca. Chewbacca was supposed to be in the ship. Rey shoots it down. Oh no, he's dead. Oh wait, he's not. C-3PO to some extent, because he gets his memory wiped. R2, we're led to believe doesn't have a good backup, a recent backup. But oh wait, he does. To be fair,
you would say like there's a lot of gotchas. Like something happens, like gotcha. It didn't actually happen.
The one that really annoyed me. Well, it didn't really annoy me. It just felt a bit. Was the one when Rey and Kylo Ren were fighting and she stabs him. And I don't know what to make of it, honestly. Like, maybe it's a legit thing. Obviously, Rey heals the snake, so we already knew she had this power. And so maybe having her heal Kylo Ren shows a kind of change of feeling, because before that, she's bordering on the dark side. We're kind of sitting there thinking, well, what's her motive? Good side, dark side? We don't know. So maybe this is her finally giving in to her dark side. And so it's one of those ones. I don't know what to make of it.
Joining the dark side in that moment than she ever has been before. It's like she's like she just saw a vision. Like, I think that was one of a powerful point in the film, because
same.
Like, and then it was also very moving for Kylo. Like, he goes and he throws that was like a crucial part. I really enjoyed that, where it's stab. I'm going to take the time to heal you. Like, nice.
I just feel like with saving people's lives specifically, it sometimes gets like a little rocky, because you can also just write it into the film where they don't die anyway. And there was a lot of back and forth, like, is he dead? No, he's not dead. Wait, is he dead now? No, he's not dead. Like the first one, when she first heals him, it's a little strange, because it's like, well, I didn't want him to die is the thing. Like, when I was watching, I'm like, wait, we haven't seen his character through yet. He needs to get to that point. You can't kill him off yet. Like, I was going to be mad if they killed him off. And the healing thing, the force healing, it's a little out of nowhere, even though it is roughly mentioned like through Palpatine in the prequels, when he's saying like you can heal others from. It's like what Anakin always wanted to do but couldn't, or something like that. Yeah, like, I don't know.
But it never felt so out of the blue for me. Like, granted, like it does raise some other issues, but like it didn't feel like, oh, this can't be done, or this is anti-canon, because there was a character whose entire arc was about finding that kind of stuff. So if anything, it invalidates that arc. But like,
it's not just that. It's not just that. It's the entire idea of somebody.
Someone
not just that. it also happened in the fight, like towards the closing stages where Kylo Ren gets tossed into the abyss.
And I was gonna get to that. But
just to finish my point.
Yeah, go for it.
The thing is, I played, spoilers if you haven't played Fallen Order, okay? But towards the end of Fallen Order, there's a scene that's similar to that where somebody's supposed to have died. Oh wait, they haven't, and it happened once. And I thought when I was playing it, I thought at that point, okay, right, I didn't like it, but I didn't dislike it because it happened like just once and it was necessary for the plot. But during the process of watching episode 9, it seemed to happen again and again, and that's kind of what bugged me, not so much the individual moments.
The idea of, to quote Luke Skywalker, the idea of no one's ever really gone is one of the most frustrating ideas to me in pretty much any film series, even with like Avengers or whatnot. The idea that we're supposed to feel super, super, super sad for someone who failed or whatnot, and just to have it be reverted, it really starts to bother me, because then I feel more numb when someone's actually about to die. And around the last sequence, when you brought up like Kylo being thrown off the pit, it's like, okay, his character's finished now, so I'm okay with him kind of dying. But then he comes back up and then like heals Rey or something, and then he dies, and it's like, well, okay, you could have made this a little less rocky. You could have got the end result with an emotional impact without this back and forth garbage that just keeps on going. And like oh my gosh, I can't believe we haven't even talked about like you kill me, you get the power of the Siths. Like, what in the world? That's just pulling out of your butt, dude. You made that up on the spot. What kind of rule is that? Like, you kill someone, you get all the, I don't know. It's just like, it doesn't need to be so much back and forth. It can still have a strong impact when it happens just once. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I kind of was okay with it when they first brought back Kylo, because I felt like it was not time for him to die yet. Yeah. And I was right. But around the end with this, like, taking power from other people and stuff, like, oh, just barely coming back, it just felt like the extension of a climax that didn't need to be extended. Just this constant, like, let's draw this out as long as we can for a movie that's already kind of long and has a lot going on to it. So I don't know. Yeah, that part, in particular, just this bringing back to life, I'm not dead kind of stuff. That stuff does get on me. Like, this, just the back and forth gets tiring to me. And it's the same thing I felt with Solo. Around the end of the Solo, there was like this backstabbing sequence where they just constantly backstab each other. It's the same kind of deal with like, okay, I'm not even surprised anymore. Like, you're setting me up for expectations, but there's nothing to expect because anything goes in this world. And Palpatine can explode in number 6 and come back. Darth Maul can get cut in half and come back. It's just, how are we supposed to actually feel something when someone dies if, like, we know it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things? I felt something when Luke died. And then when I saw in the trailer, no one's ever really gone, I was like, you better not just, like, bring that guy back somehow.
He's like, psych, here I am. What's going on?
Like, oh, no, he just teleported. He didn't die. He just teleported to another planet. Also, by the way, you can force teleport now. Did we not mention that?
Oh, wait, remind me of the scene?
I think I've cracked Star Wars.
Okay.
I think I figured everything out.
Okay.
So here's
where
I think the issues with Star Wars is that the first and second film especially, are one of the best films that have ever been created of all time. Like, they're on the high list, like, they are iconic. Like, for a lot of people, they are like peak cinema, right? Is A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. But at their core, they are dumb 80s adventure film, right? Just as much as like The Goonies or anything else. Like, a lot of film scholars like look at the 80s with like a lot of distaste because that's all that it is, these 80s adventure movies. And the first 2 Star Wars are one of those. Now, keep in mind, it is children's literature. George Lucas always wanted it to be for kids and stuff. So then that's where like Ewoks, Jar Jar, a lot of the more criticized things come in. But then you have to also realize that it is a long saga. It is like, I would say it's comparable to Fast and the Furious. Some of the movies are really good. Some of the movies are really bad. They're never going to stop making movies. And none of your favorite characters are ever really going to die because it makes them a lot of money and it brings back. And that's what it is at its core. But because Star Wars got its start as like the cinematic masterpiece, everyone is constantly holding it to like the highest standard and getting so mad. Like, if like Hobbs and Shaw came out, that wasn't a great movie. It wasn't a bad movie. It was a fun movie and nobody gave a crap about it. But because it's Star Wars, now all of a sudden everybody has to care. pick every single little detail and be really dissatisfied, and they can't just enjoy the movies that are being put out. Exactly.
Make podcasts on it. Well, and that's the thing. Like a huge again, this all just kind of goes back to what the biggest problem, honestly, with the whole idea of Star Wars is that it has such a big following that is so passionate about its name. They care so much about a simple title of a simple series, which is Star Wars. They care so much about the merchandise, the toys, the things they have, the feeling, the characters they think they know, the theories, the plot lines, and stuff like that. They all tie it to this mystical title that is nothing but what's behind it. And that's all a title is, right? It's just something that has another thing behind it, and the thing behind it is what's important. My name is Patrick. The name itself doesn't mean anything. The person behind it, though, also doesn't mean anything. But if I was a special person, then that person would mean something, right? And then the title doesn't matter. I could be named Goober, and if I was a special person, it's like... It's just people, they draw so much to this one little name because they happen to like one thing that was behind this name at one point in time. But it begs the question, like, if the name's not actually important, and they already did really good once, do they really have to constantly try to do really good again? Like, do they have to keep going with Star Wars? Do they have to keep making like new Star Wars movies?
Artistically, no.
No, not at all.
but
artistically, they're bankrupt, right? Like, they're creative.
But that's the thing, is I don't think that they are. Like, that's the hard thing about this, is that, like, at its core, I don't think most Star Wars fans are Star Wars fans. Like, for me, I really enjoy how futuristic it is, but how janky everything is. Like, they have these spaceships that are traveling at warp speed, and there's still, like, circuits breaking and things don't work. They bring out this computer, and it's, like, this massive old thing. Like, I really enjoy that aspect of it. I like visiting the different planets, the casino planets, the salt planets, like, all of that stuff is awesome.
The
like,
vistas.
The lightsaber fights, the action sequences. Like, there's so much to like about Star Wars, and for me, that's what Star Wars is about. And part of that is because I grew up with the prequels, right? For the longest time, Episode 2 was my favorite because it's so cool. You get this like droid making factory with all those sequences. You get really cool lightsaber fights between like Count Dooku and Yoda and all that. You get like this gladiator thing. Like, it's so cool. As a kid, and that's who it's for, and that's the kind of things I think you have to appreciate about the series, because it has never been one for super complex characters. Luke is a boring character. You watch the first movie and he is like a whiny little snivelly little brat the entire time, and then all of a sudden he's like one of the greatest in cinema, and it's just because the people that are complaining about it, like, I don't know, it's the same thing with music fans. Like, Star Wars fans are just like, everybody is like, Star Wars stopped being good at Return of the Jedi, it stopped being good at the prequels, it stopped being good at the sequel. Like, everybody just has their own of when it fell off, and none of them realize there's still a lot to enjoy about the series. They're just getting so nitpicky, and that's not what they grew up with.
A weak argument too, to this idea that something is completely gone because of one thing. It's like, no, they're gonna make more movies, and they're gonna have just as much of a chance as other ones. Like, these are individual pieces of art that can't be ruined because of some other piece of art. That's not how art works.
Yeah,
you know what
I haven't watched El Camino because I just really liked the end of Breaking Bad. Like, I've just chosen, like, I don't need to see that. Like, other people might watch it and really enjoy it, but I know I might not, so I'm just gonna dip out. And for me, it's like, Breaking Bad ended with the series.
And even if El Camino was like a horrible thing and you watched it, that doesn't change the original ending of Breaking Bad. It's still like a really good ending to. I think it was good. I don't remember it much.
Oh, it was so good. No, it's one of the best I would say it's the best like TV ending of all time. Like, of anything that I've seen. Like, they just ended it so well and so satisfying, and like it's really, really good.
Yeah, so it's just I hate this idea of like, this ruins Star Wars for me. It's like, what are you talking about? The things you liked about Star Wars, they're still there, and you can go back and watch them anytime. You can go back and watch The Empire Strikes Back whenever you want, and it's still going to be a really good movie. It doesn't matter what they do after or before. And so this idea that like every Star Wars movie has to be like as good as this to cherish some name, as if it's more than a name, when it's not. It's just a name. That's all Star Wars is. And if you want to look at the individual elements, you can, but like, you don't have to feel like they're hurting something that you own because they changed the stuff. So when we're talking about Star Wars fans specifically, and how like maybe not everybody's a Star Wars fan, like, I don't know what makes a Star Wars fan. I don't know, like, do you just have to like the movies? Like, do you have to like the lore? Like, do you have to fanboy? Like,
here's the line that I draw. I think that whenever you are dealing with any large intellectual property, the thing that you have to like is the setting. and the genre, right? Like, again, I like Star Wars because of the lightsabers, because of because of the things they get to interact with, and I get really excited whenever they interact with those things in new ways. Kylo Ren, whenever he first had his like great blade lightsaber with the things coming out of the side, some people were like, that looks kind of dumb. I didn't think so. I thought that was awesome because I want to see stuff like that. That's why I like the extended Star Wars universe so much, is because there's so much crap like that.
Yeah.
And I think the same could be said for anything else, right? Because different people, right? The same person who made the original trilogies was not the same person who made the prequel, even though it's so much has happened since then. And that's not the same person who made the sequels. And we had two different people making the sequels. Same thing with Marvel movies. Like, different people are making those films. You have to enjoy the world that they are in order to be a fan of that thing. And you can criticize some movies, but like, I don't know. Like, if you hate every single movie that's coming out, maybe it's time for you to dip out and not care about the films.
Right. And like, I already made my peace with dipping out after number 9. Like, I feel like that was the last Star Wars movie I need to see, because what fascinated me about Star Wars growing up was the same thing that you said, like all the visual excitement and the lightsabers in this world that they created, the different races and whatnot. That was all super exciting. For me, though, now that that's been told, like, or been shown, displayed like a million times, I'm looking for other things now within them. And when Star Wars is able to do all that stuff that we love about it, but then also do really good on the storytelling elements or the really good characters, like the few cases with Empire Strikes Back or possibly Revenge of the Sith in some areas, I have to fully appreciate that and call them out on it when it's not doing that, because I have to give more appreciation to when they did it right. Because this stuff can be done right, when it's not done right, you have to acknowledge that it's not done right. And I think that's why I still like critique Star Wars to this point. It's because they've been able to do Star Wars right before, and they've been able to mix these elements that we all love. If they're not able to mix the elements anymore, if that's just not able to be done anymore, then they shouldn't be making movies. I mean, that's the artistic way. If you can't make something perfect, if you can't make something to your perfect ability, then like, should you even make it?
I think my answer to that is a violent yes. Like, you should most definitely make stuff even if it's not perfect, because nothing you make is perfect. Like, that's kind of a toxic, like a very problematic thing in general, because then nothing would get made.
No. To clarify, from a practice standpoint, from trying to make things better in the future, absolutely, you should never stop creating. You should always be creating things, right? That's the creative philosophy. But from like from continuations specifically, from trilogies and stories that build up, like, should you continue to build up a story if the story is already finished? Like, at some point, something has to have an end, or maybe it doesn't have an end, but it's constantly
you realize that like looking at the prequels especially is useful for this, because that's the story that George Lucas always wanted to tell. And the reason why he couldn't was because of technology, and then technology reached there, and then he told it. And we would never know that that's not the thing that we don't like if we didn't try it, or I don't know, because like, it was never meant to be this whole thing from the get-go. So even Empire Strikes Back is already a victim of, this made a lot of money, let's make a second one kind of thing.
Yeah, and it happened to work for them. You know what I mean? I just like, it's like...
if I remember correctly, people actually... I'm going to Google this right now, but I'm pretty sure Empire Strikes Back got a lot of flack back in the day.
Yeah.
It's
an article. I remember reading an article. It was like a big... I can't remember what it was, but it basically said Empire Strikes Back was rubbish, and there was no way they were going to salvage it or something like that if they did another one.
Well, and time has even been kind of nice to the prequels at this point, right? Like, people are kind of turning back on what they said with the prequels, and same thing might happen with the sequels in the future. Maybe in the future people are going to be like, we had it right or whatnot.
Well, because you have to realize, like, the kids that are watching the sequels right now, that are dressing up as these characters that are, swinging lightsabers around, like, they're going to be our age one day, and they're going to look really fondly back on the sequels because they are enjoyable films. Like, whenever you strip away the burdens of high cinema, Star Wars films are incredible and a lot of fun, and that's what makes it last, is these generations loving their version of it and just appreciating it and enjoying it despite all of its flaws.
Right. I'm just more fond of the idea of recreating different types of magic, different types of things that people will dress up for and hold dearly to their heart, than doing the same thing that's been like done a lot, or at least presenting it as something else. So I guess, like, because so many, like, I know generations in like time at which you see art, that's kind of a weird topic because that's constantly changing, and like the people who exist in it is constantly changing, and then you get into like art critique and the subjectivity of like one person's experience versus another person's experience based off age, and like how much of that should matter, and like how much should demographics matter, and that's like a whole nother like can of worms or whatnot. But essentially what it comes down to is as a film critic myself, I really look for good film or good story within characters being told in movies. So when I see movies that don't have that great, I call that out on them. And it's pretty much most of the Star Wars movies, I still like call them out or whatnot. Now, I still appreciate their existence in this universe. It's the same thing with like Marvel movies. Their reason for existing, it makes sense to me. Like, I get that. I get why people want to see like all these like starships or whatnot. So yeah, when I say like you should always make something to as best as you can make it, that's from a new critical standpoint. It's not from like an end all like give up because you can't be as good as the greats or anything like that. I didn't mean it in a toxic
I know
way.
you didn't, but like it's that line of thinking that's kind of like, because we have to remember that J.J. Abrams is, you know, a big time director who makes tons of money making these films. He's also a creative individual, you know, so it's like at the core, like there are people making these films, and especially with something as beloved as Star Wars, like despite our criticisms of the sequels, they recognize that they should give the creative control like to this person, that it didn't feel like there was a lot of like studio, you know, like mucking around with until
and creative control is a huge deal. Like like that's probably one of the biggest problems with the new trilogy, is just how little creative control that they seem to have had. Maybe they had more than we're giving them credit for, but with all of the I'd like to think that a lot of the bad decisions were not made from them because they like thought that would be best for the series or whatnot, or for the story they want to tell. But ultimately, I'm looking at it from a standpoint as like, you know, art is something that has to have this element of showcasing to other people other than just yourself, right? And because that's the whole existence of art. Is it really art if nobody ever sees it? It's supposed to have some kind of that's the ideology of what art is. So when I look at like this film or whatnot, this art, like I have to look at it as this is how it is being presented to me. Like it's on my platter. It's a plate that's being given to me and I'm eating it. And I got to be able to say what I dislike about it, because what it's made is something that's meant to be seen and reacted to. So it's like we have to share our reactions to specific things. So I don't really like, let's say, romantic comedies. That's not really my genre, right? When people feed it to me, I got to give what my reaction is, because it's a piece of art that's made to get a reaction from someone. But I also fully acknowledge, like, this dish was not made for me. You know, this dish was made for someone else.
And
so
I think that's a really, really crucial aspect of it, is that different films you ingest different ways. And again, like Star Wars has been mislabeled ever since the beginning. Like, and that's causing it a lot of issues where like we saw a massive drop. This is the third highest drop in between weekends in cinema history between people seeing it. Like it is like, this film is still doing fine. Like it's $100 million, like whatever, but it's not doing as well. I feel like a large part of that is because of like the fans and stuff, and because people are treating it differently. I don't know. I've been over that.
And when we say fans, we typically mean people other than like the people we've been talking to the last couple of years about Star Wars movies, right? Like for podcasts, I mean, like we're talking more about the more outraged kind of people, right? The people who
that's the thing, is I
feel like
think
it's their property.
I think that like it's really easy for us to say like, oh, we're talking about those fans and not us fans. But we've also recorded numerous podcasts criticizing the Star Wars movies at length. Like at the end of the day, if somebody was to do a Google search and find nerds criticizing the Star Wars films, like they could find us. And I think that the distance of a screen is what makes that so easy to be like, no, that's those fans and that's us. Because you see someone tweet and they're like, Rose sucked in that film. And we're like, that's a crazy fan. And then podcasts are like, Rose sucked in that film. Like we are those fans, and that's why we do have to take some kind of responsibility and make it a constructive thing instead of just like, you know, crapping on a Star Wars. Because at the end of the day, like the fan base for Star Wars is more than just criticizing a film, right? It's one thing to be like, we have to be able to react to it or that kind of thing. But Hayden Christensen is no longer in Hollywood because, in a large part, due to the backlash of his prequel trilogies. Kelly Tran, who played Rose, was bullied off of social media because of people's reactions to this. Like, it has gotten to the point where Star Wars is not just affecting like, oh, big studios or something. It is impacting people's lives because we as fans cannot handle ourselves.
But I mean, to be fair, there's a big difference between like film critique and straight up human indecency, right?
But That's the thing, is it's the build up. Like, there was a lot of people being very, very mean to Rose, saying really horrible racist things like, got you. Yeah. But there's also people who are constantly tweeting at her like, hey, you had no part in this film. This was bad. This would have been better if there had been a different actor. And like, all of that stuff can really build up upon itself. Like,
even that, I don't think is as much tied with a piece of art critique. That's more like, because like even with actors specifically, they're acting out a part that the director directs for them. And
yeah, it's a job.
It's like, to make it's the people who specifically make it personal that end up making it a problem, because you can entirely critique a piece of art without any of it being personally directed at the artist themselves. Yes. And that's ideally what film criticism is. Like, ideally, you can totally look into something without the creator's mind even like being referenced or whatnot, or emotional state. So like what sucks is what Star Wars fans has kind of become to me, like my understanding of the word, and everyone has their own understanding of like what a fan is or whatnot, but it's unfortunately kind of had like a negative connotation where when I picture Star Wars fans, I picture people who treat it as their property that people are messing with, and then they take it personally and do a personal retaliation against that, which it goes against the purpose of like film critique. The purpose is to just try to better understand different perspectives. That's the whole idea of critique in general. And then people, when they make it personal, they turn it into like more like attacks or whatnot. And that's obviously not cool. But like, I think it's important to know the distinction between personal attacks and then just talking about like a piece of art, like a dish that was made for you, and then eating it and reacting to it. Because this entire time you and I are sharing our like reactions to this movie, how this movie affected us or whatnot. And at no point in time are we like, like going to anyone's house or anything like that, breaking windows. It's just important to know the distinction. And it sucks that a lot of people don't know the distinction. A lot of people just associate the two together. And that's when critique turns into a problem. But yeah, I don't even know where we started when we got into this spiral. I don't even know if James is still in the call or if we if we bored him out anymore. Ultimately, because we're getting around wrap up time, if anyone has some like overarching closing thoughts about either this movie or just the saga in general, now would probably be a good time to say it.
I would like to leave us with this review that I found on StarWars.com. This is from the Daily Telegraph in 1980 in reference to...
Yeah, that's what I saw. That's what I saw.
Yeah. Meanwhile, what we get on the screen is the usual emphatic pride and machinery and paucity of characterization that marks so much space fiction. Who are these people? What are they up to? Why is it so hard to care what happens to them? If you ever saw and committed to Star Wars, such questions may seem naively exacting, since this episode reintroduces many of the figures and fantasies from the earlier film. Like, literally the 5th episode, which is like the 3rd highest rated film of all time on IMDb right now, is getting the exact same criticisms at The Last Jedi. I think everything is better. Also, this mentions that back then they even knew it was going to be a 9-part saga. So you could even argue that like this sequel trilogy was in George Lucas's original things. And I love it all. Like, Star Wars is really, really awesome. Like, I grew up with Star Wars toys and everything, and I still am just such a fan of the stuff that they put out.
Okay. James?
I mean, at the end of the day, taking the movie as I did the entire saga or the trilogy, the sequel trilogy, as they are. There was a lot of good moments in it. There was a lot of action, a lot of stuff that people definitely would buy into. The younger generation and all that. And at the end of the day, I enjoyed them for what they were. I'm not much of a film critic. I'm more of a casual viewer, and they did the job. They were enjoyable in that. After coming out of The Last Jedi, I was genuinely hyped. I was probably the only one that was like really hyped by it, because I just really took to some of the stuff that went on. But yeah, episode 9, it was all right. It was good.
Yeah,
there's my underwhelming feedback.
I think a good way to kind of close this all together is no matter how many different movies they make, and no matter how much they might be not as good as the originals or might be better than the originals, the most important thing is that they all get included into Lego Star Wars. So we're going to get to play 7, 8, and 9 in the Skywalker saga, which I'm totally going to buy day one. Lego Star Wars. That's the best thing that came out of Star Wars. Let's be real. I feel like the stories were much more enjoyable when they're told in Lego form than in any other form. So at the very least, we got that. But yeah, if I were just to give that individual movie, I would say it's I liked it just as much as I pretty much liked the others. Maybe episode 8 a little bit more. I did like a whole tier list a while back. I don't know if I shared it online, but it feels good to have to almost be done with it. It feels like, all right, cool. I can now I feel like I've said everything I need to say about Star Wars almost. Like I've got that on lock and key. Like I've got a full picture in my head now of how I feel about Star Wars, and I can set that film analysis project aside. I can be like, okay, I can now shelve this. I'm done with this, and move on to other stuff. And then Mandalorian comes out, and I reopen it up. Like, wait, this Mandalorian thing is interesting. This is an interesting show.
Not available in the UK until 31st of March.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, get the free trial and then just like binge it. And then tell yourself you're going to stop the free trial, but then actually continue to pay for it like I did. So, but yeah. By the way, just quick food for thought. I've actually been enjoying The Mandalorian a lot more than I expected to. And that really surprised me. I was like, wow. I kind of wish there was more Mandalorian elements in the new movies. But yeah. Also, I think it's interesting to mention that I feel like this is the most on the same page people have been about a Star Wars movie in a long time. Like, I feel like we echoed a lot of what other people were saying about, like, yeah, it's all right. It was exciting. It's just really messy, and yeah, it just seems like too fan driven or whatnot. It seems like that's just the general consensus now of like, because episode 8 like was way split. Like everybody was all over the place with episode 8, but this one I feel like everyone's like, okay, yeah, we all kind of got the same. I feel like we all feel relatively the same about it, but which maybe isn't a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe that when there's less discussion, it becomes a bad thing. I don't know.
I think it means people are tired and they've realized that
that's what it is.
Like,
we're just exhausted.
It is hard to it's hard to. I think they're realizing like, oh, it's a like dumb action film. Like they realize that the people behind it are not trying to communicate this super large, complex, high cinema kind of stuff, and so they're like, oh, it was fun, it was enjoyable, whatever. They're done with it. I get it. They didn't care as much as we thought they did, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think on that note, be a good time to close this off. Some of the people who have fallen in our discussion, unfortunately, they couldn't make it. Put your Fs in the chat. 3D Spotters and Danny, both their links will be in the description. And then, of course, we have James and Douglas and myself. And then our special guest, Talon, who you may plug anything you wish to plug now.
I have so much.
Well, I want to plug. Oh, sorry. Oh, to you.
No, you go for it. Go for it.
No. I'm kidding.
James Douglas, you're the Cakecore guy. You got to go first, all right?
No. Okay. What am I doing at the moment? Well, I've actually got a Star Wars series coming out on my channel. If you enjoy Star Wars Battlefront, the original 2005 version, I am currently uploading Galactic Conquest from one of my saves there. So that's some Star Wars content.
There you go. Talon.
I have done a lot. I'm in the process of completely rebranding and restructuring Newton's Darkroom right now. So there's a lot of changes, more than I can probably go into now. But I will pitch this for 2020. Every episode of the Newton's Darkroom Presents podcast is going to have original music, and then we're releasing that original music as an EP on Spotify, iTunes. Like we're even doing cassette releases and stuff. So a lot of cool kind of like integration of music and podcasting, as well as like 2 new feeds that we're opening up, like a visual rebranding, new website, all kinds of stuff. So go follow me on Twitter at Newton's Darkroom if you want more updates on all of that craziness, because it's a lot.
Can I ask you, how long has Newton's Darkroom existed now?
Officially, about 2 years now. I started back in late 2017, but the first stuff that we released was around this time in 2018. So
because I remember when you like were first starting it up and whatnot, and I was like, dang, I really hope this like continues to go, because you're obviously so passionate about it, and it makes me so happy that you're still like fully force going at it, and it's just like getting bigger and more powerful than either of us, right?
It's very exciting. That's like one of the reasons why I'm implementing these changes, is because it's a confusing thing, but we're moving into just a podcast studio to hopefully like make it easier just to communicate and and grow and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of the
Right.
changes that I made have been with the intention of, pushing it more. I've spent the last like day or so putting together press kits, so once that gets all set, then setting stuff out. So it is growing a lot, and I'm really excited.
That's
My goal
great.
is to be even more. Go check it out.
Well, fellas, you should definitely check that out. Yeah, it's called twitter.com/Tales of Passing Fantasy. It's got lots of
not
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, for real, check out Newton's Darkroom. It's very fascinating. And as for James Douglas, his channel links in the description. I'm just, Cakecore guy right now. I don't really have anything else going on. So feel free to stick around on Cakecore. Oh, the marathon, February 22nd. So many announcements are being announced about that I don't even know what I can say about it right now. But follow us on Twitter if you'd like to see weekly announcements until February 22nd at 9 a.m. Pacific for a 24-hour marathon. It's going to be the best marathon we've had yet, and it's all going to be for charity, so you should definitely check that out. Okay, that's what I got to plug. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know the channel's been a little bit vacant. We're going to try to fill up that vacant property soon, so stay tuned and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos. And on that note, I will see you all later. So long.
Goodbye.